Welcome, everyone. Hey, Ken, welcome. I'm going to make you a co-host so you hopefully show up at the top.
How's it going?
Good. You look like you might be in an office or you have a great spot in your house.
No, definitely office. I lucked out. They weren't using this room in the hospital, and they're like, "Oh, you can use this room, and it's got this huge window, and is right next to the president of the hospital." So I've got to be on my game.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. You're like, this is better than my couch at home. I think I'll take you up on that.
I'm going to ask if I can just stay here and do my Vanderbilt classes remotely from this office instead.
That would be good.
I was going to say, you look like a hospital CEO right now. I'm impressed.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Channeling those vibes.
Hey, Jake. All right. I just made you a co-host, Jake. I thought making people co-hosts would move them up in the video. I'm not sure if that is working, but welcome. Welcome, everyone. We'll just give it another minute. I know everyone's probably logging on in the midst of their lunch hour, middle of their day. Let's see, got several people on. Let's see if Birch can join. Yeah, it's great to see all your faces. Courtney and I are sick of seeing each other every day.
I know, this is already 2 times in one day. It's pretty early to already have that number. And it's early in the week, Amanda.
We're ready to add more people to our Owen mix.
Yeah.
But it's great to see everyone's faces. I feel like I've seen everyone on paper and in emails and have talked to a few people. So it's so nice to see a face with a name, and also no shame if you need to put up your blank screen too. We know you might be in the middle of other things, but we can get started in just 1 second. Give me 1 second. I wish, like Ken, I was next to the CEO in a nice office, but I'm in my house, so. Well, why don't we get started? I know Birchwood is potentially going to join as well, but welcome everyone. We're so happy to see you all. I know many of you might have joined other webinars we've done over the summer for the CMC, but we saved the best for last, healthcare. And you might have noticed what's a little bit different about this, obviously, than the other ones we've done is healthcare is obviously an industry and not just a function. Every function exists within it. So it's a bigger umbrella, and it's a really big program at Owen with a lot of opportunities, both while you're at Owen in terms of classes and things you can focus on and the resources at Owen and across the campus, but then obviously also through recruiting with a ton of different opportunities and career paths, probably more in just the industry of healthcare than just, thinking just corporate finance or brand management. There's so many things within that umbrella. So what we wanted to do today was probably most importantly, introduce you to some of the resources you'll have at Owen, the people, and we'll go through that in a second, but I'm extremely excited to have 3 of our current students and leaders in the Vanderbilt Business Healthcare Association join us. So talk about the resources, but then also just kind of begin to talk about the different career paths and opportunities within healthcare that you can focus on at Owen. And this is just a short time to begin talking about it, and hopefully the first of many, many conversations you'll have with me, with the CMC, with the students, but just to give you an intro. So I will also say, having done a few of these, and I'm sure you've been on lots of video Zoom calls already, they're much more fun when people have questions and it's not just a few people talk. You probably don't want to hear me talk for the next hour. So I would love if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat anytime and we can answer them right away or get to them after at another part. or just feel free to unmute yourself and talk. I think it's much more helpful for you if we, answer the questions you have and answer them while we're talking about a certain topic. So I also see Birch joined. Hi, Birch. Good to see you. So we can jump in and I'll start with introductions for everybody. And again, feel free to ask questions anytime. But first, just from the CMC perspective, I am obviously here and I just noticed for some reason, Zoom and Brightspace love to use my name when I was a student. I graduated from Owen in 2009. So I'll revert back to my Amanda Pullins, my former self, but I'm Amanda Fend. I am the healthcare coach in the CMC. I've been at Owen for 8 years as a coach, and also, as I just mentioned, went to Owen, so I was in your shoes not too long ago, and know how that feels. So I'm excited to have a chance to meet you all soon and work with you throughout the next 2 years. And I'll let Courtney, my colleague, introduce herself as well from my team.
Hi, yes, I'm Courtney Fain. I've been with Owen now for 4 years, and I work on the employer relations side. So a lot of the back and forth with alums and the recruiters that come on campus and helping coordinate that effort, especially when it comes to info sessions and interviews. And we utilize the VBHA a lot in that process. So they're going to be a really big resource for you. Yeah, so you'll hear more from me as orientation comes around. There's a system that we use and like a platform for career navigating. And so you'll see a lot of me, but it's nice to see you all today.
Thanks, Courtney. And then next, I know Birch is here. Birch is the leader of the healthcare program at Owen, also a fellow Owen alum, and I'll let you introduce yourself, Birch, and the rest of the team now.
All right. Hi, I'm Birch Wood. I'm the Director of Healthcare Programs here at Owen, and as Amanda said, an Owen alum. Our healthcare team, what we call Team Healthcare, consists of Larry Van Horn, who is our faculty advisor, Scarlett Gilfus, who's Director of Healthcare Corporate Partnerships, and wrangles Larry for us. If you try and wrangle Larry, you're going to have to talk to Scarlett. And then Anna Kennedy, who is the program coordinator for healthcare in our MMHC program. And she's the one that makes sure things get done around here. So good thing to know Anna and keeping good spirits with her.
Awesome. Thanks, Birch. And then I truly always think probably you're all here really just to hear from the students, the people who are in it right now, and they're one of the most helpful resources. So I'll turn it over to you, Renee, and Jake and Ken to talk about the VBHA, and would love to hear if you want to introduce yourselves as well and just your story in healthcare at Owen would be awesome.
Sure. Thanks, Amanda. Yeah, so I'm Renee Casali, rising second year, healthcare concentration, and maybe finance, maybe not. I'm the president of VBHA, so it's our healthcare club at Owen. We hope you all join. So we want to put a little plug in about our organization. Basically, we're just a resource to bring in speakers, other educational resources, make that connection between the classroom and recruiting, and kind of serve as another forum to talk healthcare, learn about healthcare, and just have another network to tap into. We not only have great students in the club, but we also have a great alumni network that love to give back and reconnect. So just a little bit about me. Prior to Owen, I worked in healthcare consulting, and now I am interning this summer at DaVita, wrapping up in just about 2 weeks here. So it's going well, and I'm going to pass it over to Jake to introduce himself.
Jake, I think you're on mute, buddy.
There we go. Sorry, everybody. I'm not used to being the hosting one on Zoom meetings. I'm usually a passive observer. But yeah, so my name's Jake Barry. I'm the Vice President of Alumni Relations. Lately, I've been managing our LinkedIn page, which in the next couple of weeks, after we kind of figure out one small logistical detail, I will probably send all of you a link to join. I'm also in charge of scheduling things like lunch and learns and alumni events, networking, maybe some happy hours when it's safe to do, whatever point that is. and just I'll be your contact with just anything related to alumni as a whole. Before Owen, I worked in business development for a company called SeniorLink in Boston. This summer, I'm with Optum as part of their launch leadership program, working on their Optum at Home team. And Ken?
Yeah, I'm Ken Barnes. I'm a rising second year as well, VP of Communications. So for VBHA, you'll be seeing stuff on Brightspace and via email, and then I'm helping Jake with LinkedIn or anything like that. So that's what I'm doing with VBHA. Prior to Vanderbilt, I was in the Navy as a submarine officer, definitely doing a career switch into healthcare. And so this summer I'm up at UPMC in Pittsburgh as a hospital administrator resident, finishing up here in about 2 weeks. So if you have any questions about hospital administration or anything in that realm of healthcare, then I'm your guy. But just another plug from what Renee was saying. I think one of the biggest resources for me as someone switching into healthcare for the first time was just leveraging all of the knowledge that already exists within the students at Owen. And you think primarily second years, and we'd love to have your, have those discussions, but also with your own classmates who are coming from healthcare companies or have contacts at healthcare companies. I was surprised by how many connections my own classmates had within the healthcare industry. So don't forget to look at each other when you're looking at networking as well.
That's great. And I will say, and I know Courtney probably feels very similarly, that the professional student clubs are incredibly active at Owen. And they change every year and there's different leadership, but of all the years I've been here and all the clubs, the VBHA has been incredibly active and a huge resource that's taken it very seriously, taken their role very seriously, done innovative new things, and just been a huge resource for current students. So to your point, Ken, classmates, absolutely, but then the second years who are similar to your classmates, but also have just gone through this process and learned a lot and really want to share it with you. So I've been very grateful for the VBHA, and I'm excited about this year's board. So that said, did you want to say anything else? Sorry, I didn't hit the slide yet.
No, that's okay. If anyone has questions, we can definitely field them at the end, or feel free to reach out to any of us and we can share more. But I think we're still going to be having the club fair, and you'll be getting a lot more information in the coming weeks.
Awesome, thanks. And then lastly, so just to recap, obviously you'll have a resource in the CMC with Courtney and I, obviously Birch and the whole healthcare team at Owen, the VBHA, and all the second year students in it. And just one more resource, just to touch on quickly, is a program we have at Owen where we interview and hire rising and then current second year students to be peer coaches for first year students. So you'll be assigned a peer coach, ideally based on your area of interest and their background. And those peer coaches are really an extension of the CMC. So you'll already have an amazing resource in all the healthcare second years in the VBHA and just as colleagues at Owen, but you will also have a dedicated peer coach, which I think students find very helpful as well. So where do healthcare MBAs go? I feel like with healthcare compared to all the other areas, it is so broad. And when you look, if you were to look back, and I've done this with our data, if you look back at all of the years of healthcare students and where they've gone, they really go all over the place, but there tend to be, three main buckets where we see students go into, and those look very different in terms of what recruiting looks like, what that process looks like, and even within them, what they do. But just to touch on those, the first is really care delivery. So hospital, so Ken is at a hospital right now doing hospital administration in the provider space, and that can look different based on what type of program it is, if it's in Nashville, or if it's somewhere else nationally, the process to get into that. And Ken, I'd love to hear your experience, but that is very distinct, I think, from some of the on-campus recruiting that companies do through Owen. And then corporate, obviously that's a really big bucket where I would call that any company that is recruiting Owen students for a specific function or an LDP program. And that's everything from a company in med device to pharma to biotech to tech to just healthcare company like DaVita, where Renee is. So it's a huge bucket. And what the recruiting looks like also depends a little bit on how that company is recruiting, whether it's through recruiting at Owen or at a larger event outside of Owen. And we'll talk about that in a second too. And then the last one is consulting, which is also a very big and broad space, but there are some specific firms that recruit healthcare students. And that process, again, looks different than those other two. But just to go back, and Birch, I would love, if feel free to jump in anytime. I know you came from the provider space before Owen, and Ken, I'd love you to share your experience. But when you see students go into that space, what have you seen that look like from your experience?
They go all kinds of places. Even I was sort of a mix of both. I did internal consulting for Vanderbilt Hospital when I left Owen, and then went into emergency department strategy and operations at LifePoint, which was basically an internal consulting role as well. So, there's a lot of internal consulting work done there. There's some where you're actually leading teams of people and doing things. Renee is in one that's a mix of the renal care and corporate LDP program. So a lot of our places, even if you're doing corporate or consulting, ends up being care delivery. And so there is a very wide swath of people, from finance to marketing to operations to general management to strategy, all the way across the board, that our students go into, and in all different programs. It's very interesting. Our list of companies that students go to is very broad and very scattered, and we have some good, strong programs that recruit strong every year. But we have some that are smaller companies that pick up a student every 3 or 4 years, and they're pretty regular about it. They're just a much smaller company. So there's lots of opportunities and places out there, and the more you get out and do networking and meet your fellow students and talk with Larry and I and talk with people in the community, the better your options of getting exactly what you're looking for as you come out of business school.
And to that point, so what Birch kind of emphasized, it's not necessarily that a lot of hospitals are saying, hey, we need to go recruit a bunch of MBAs every year at Owen. It's a little more of a self-driven process where you're applying to fellowships or residencies and seeking out those opportunities, while some do come to Owen as well. Ken, how did you get into your role this summer?
So I actually Googled best summer residency programs for MBA students and applied to the top 10, essentially. So none of those programs came and recruited on campus. I primarily use the CMC for things like resume review or interview prep. I know I've already given a plug to fellow students, but that was probably the best resource in terms of preparing for that process. Was I found a few of the second years who had done similar summer residency programs and were interested in fellowship programs after Owen, and I sat down and talked to them about how they prepared for interviews, what their timeline looked like in terms of when to be expecting, applications to be open and closing, and then really just leveraging their wealth of knowledge that they learned through the process. So that was the biggest, my biggest plug for that. And again, I think I can speak for my class when I say that we're excited to do that same thing for the incoming, first years. We're excited to kind of show you the lessons that we learned the hard way, or pass on those nuggets of information that are going to help make it a little bit easier for you.
That's awesome. Thank you. And with corporate too, Courtney, do you want to talk for a second? I know Courtney is the one who is really out talking to companies that are recruiting for LDP programs, recruiting through Owen day in, day. So if you have any thoughts you wanted to share on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'd say the more established programs, larger programs, companies or hospitals that have LDP programs usually have a more clear, linear recruiting process, which can be less anxiety ridden for you all. However, those more established programs perhaps are drawing even more applicants. So it's very encouraging to apply and have some traction in there, but don't be discouraged if you find other opportunities that perhaps are not directly tied to what we have in our on-campus recruiting system, because all three of these folks and the rest of the club will tell you that, and Birch just mentioned, it's very diverse where the students you all go, and that's a result of personal reach out and alumni connections. But there are definitely some stronghold companies and programs that you'll see a more clearly defined process as you go through all of this.
And in that same bucket, so Renee and Jake, you obviously are at bigger companies this summer. What did that process look like for you? And did you only focus on kind of that corporate bucket, or were you looking at either of the other two areas?
You want to kick us off, Renee? I'll
I can't hear Jake. Go ahead, Jake.
So I did look at kind of the bigger companies on the payer side. So the Optum United Healthcare, the Cigna, the Humana, but I also did some kind of individual outreach to companies like Amedisys, which is local in Nashville, which is one of the largest home care, hospice, and personal care providers in the company. I don't know what their plans are next year, but they were definitely interested in having some of us come around. I also did some individual outreach to Navi Health, which is like a post-acute care kind of solutions and technology company. They don't necessarily have a formal MBA recruiting process, but we do have some alums there, and they'll be willing to talk to you, I'm sure. And as they were just purchased by Optum, I'm sure they might kind of add a little bit of capacity maybe as their budget expands, and it might become a bit more formalized. But no promises there. I don't really know what I'm talking about. But yeah, those are the ones that I did. Oh, also Contessa Health, which is owned by or started by Travis Messina, who is an Owen alum. He was very, very helpful in the process, and that's also local.
You do know what you're talking about, because that was the first thing we all said when they got bought by Optum. Like, great, maybe this will create more of a.
Well, when I said I don't know what I'm talking about, I don't know what they're looking for in terms of a more standardized MBA program. But just thinking, with the additional capital that the Optum purchase has brought on, they might be able to kind of formalize and have room for some of those MBA salary positions.
Yeah, and I started my recruiting process at the Forte Women's MBA conference during the summer prior to starting at Owen. So learned about I basically was targeting all the healthcare companies there, trying to learn more about them, what they have to offer. And that's where DaVita really caught my eye. So I kind of went through not a typical recruiting process as you would through on-campus recruiting. It was more kind of going through the Forte channel. Same thing that happened with Cigna, although I feel like in general, some of the processes I followed were the exact same that, on-campus recruiting would follow. So definitely can speak a lot to that if anyone has questions. And me personally, I was looking for, a bigger, corporate company that was going to have an established program. I did do some individual outreach as well to Amedisys, a couple other small companies, but at the end of the day, once I really compared my options, I really liked the idea of the structure and as well as like the clout of a program and the name that, like for example, DaVita's Redwoods program or Cigna's, financial development program. Some of those titles coming out as an MBA, it's like your only opportunity to enter that program is, as an intern between the 2 years of your MBA as well as coming on full time. So I thought that's just a huge opportunity that wasn't worth passing up. And so that's kind of the way that I approach recruiting and thinking about my future opportunities.
Yeah, I would kind of echo a little bit of what Renee said in terms of just why I chose Optum. Again, for the program that I'm in, it's really only just post MBAs, but also the flexibility that it gives you within Optum and kind of broader United Healthcare. So the way that my program is structured, there's 3 different specific MBA programs within Optum. There's the Launch Leadership Program, which I'm in. There's the OLE, which tends to recruit kind of specifically from kind of Fuqua, Harvard, Wharton, Ross, Booth, kind of the schools like that. But there is kind of opportunity to get there. And I work a lot with those OLE students. And I think if that's something I figure out that I want to do, I think that opportunity might exist for me post MBA. And there's also kind of Optum Advisory Services, which is a very consulting focused program within Optum in the payer and provider space.
That's perfect. Thank you guys. So obviously, even just on this call with the students joining, you can see there's such a range in the areas that students are interested in, but a lot of opportunities. And we'll talk in a few minutes just about how to think about narrowing your focus and approaching and aligning what you're doing with what that area requires. And just for that last bucket, Courtney, do you want to say anything about healthcare consulting? I know it's more of a niche area, but.
Yeah, and Jake touched on it. So there are opportunities. We have an alum who started the Optum Advisory Services Connection. EY comes specifically for healthcare. There are opportunities at certain other firms that recruit with us that have specific healthcare lines. I think as an add-on to your interaction with VBHA, it is, if you're really considering consulting specifically, it's something to consider your interaction with the OSCC, the Consulting Club, and the case prep that they provide is really something to consider. That's a more broad, overarching, general consulting framework that they offer. And so certainly interacting with the VBHA will be helpful because it gets more specific as you go along the process. But we do have some firms that concentrate in healthcare and will be on site or interact with you. And that's certainly an option.
Awesome. Thank you. So I feel like we could talk about this slide for a long time because everything falls somewhere in this big spectrum. But just to move on, what I thought would be helpful, let me get to it, is this is obviously not about healthcare, but we made this slide a few years ago, and I think it's a really helpful way just to think about MBA recruiting in general, because it's easy to think about, you know, everyone will get here and okay, we're all gonna like be looking for internships, looking for jobs, and there's one way to do that. But really, the process you will go through will vary hugely by what you're focusing on. And the two axes here, I think, really do a good job of helping people think through, like, where does my area fall? So the vertical one, you know, abundant versus rare, what all we mean is this a job that's abundant for MBAs? Is this a job where a company says, hey, we hire a bunch of MBAs every year in this area. We know we're going to do it. We forecasted for it. This is the process. Like, here's the job. Like, if you are a marketing student and in a few months, you go on Indeed.com or LinkedIn Jobs and type in brand management internship, there will be a ton of jobs. Every CPG will post one of those. If you are an MBA and you're like, I think I want to do private equity, and you go on LinkedIn Jobs and type in like private equity associate, there's not going to be a lot of jobs for MBAs. Those jobs are not like, hey, let's go to business schools and recruit a bunch of MBAs every year. So that's one way to think about it. Is this something that's like very common for MBAs, or is this something that's more rare for MBAs? And then when you think about what recruiting will look like for that area, is it something that's more transactional? And all I mean by that is it something that a company is going to post their job, people will apply, they'll look at all the applications and say, like, which of these is the best fit? Let's interview them, done. So surprisingly, I'd say like Amazon is someone that falls more in that transactional side, where like it's great to get a referral and you should, you know, ideally it's a nice thing to have, but they don't care if you've networked with 15 people at the company. Like, don't put that in your cover letter. I don't care that you've talked to them. I just want to see if you pass our test, what your resume looks like. Do you have the skills, et cetera, versus networking driven. I don't work with a lot of real estate students, but over the years, I've realized that if you want to get into real estate development, you could, if you just applied on a website, they'd probably never look at your application. You would have to network and have coffees and get referred and kind of get into that area. So you can kind of think about this, you can apply healthcare on these spectrums and think about, is this thing I want to do in healthcare something that's abundant and more of like a typical transactional process? And I might put like a, you know, an MBA LDP more in that area. Now, depends on the company. They might care more about networking. Like, I think DaVita might be a company where there's been a lot of alums. Like, maybe they will value that more than a company where we don't have any alums and they're just like, yeah, just apply and we'll look at all the applications. Or is it something that is more rare? Do you want to work in this very specific area of healthcare in Nashville? That's going to fall in the networking. Like, Nashville healthcare is typically more networking driven. So this is a good thing to keep in mind as you're thinking about what you want to do in healthcare. Like, where does that fall on the spectrum? And then therefore, what will recruiting look like? Like, what kinds of things do I need to do to get that job? Because if you're applying to a hospital, like if you are Ken, or if you were someone who's like, I want to do healthcare consulting at EY, like your path will look very different. And so I think it's important. We talk about personal scale all the time. It goes also to like what your job search will look like. Like, you all have different backgrounds. You want to do different things. And within healthcare, that can look really, really different. So I think it's just a helpful thing to keep in mind as you're thinking about your search.
And Amanda, one thing I'd add there, to put a plug in for Leadership Healthcare, it's an amazing professional development network in Nashville, part of the Nashville Healthcare Council. And it kind of ties out those two sides. You can definitely go the transactional route where there's a lot of companies coming on campus and they're doing that like process-driven approach for recruiting. But then if you really are looking for something that's more local or specific in the Nashville community, joining Leadership Healthcare gives you those opportunities to attend lunch and learns, attend breakfast, and like join these like coffee chat groups where you can really get to know other people and network with people in the community and create those connections that can ultimately drive you to a potential position that wouldn't be something that jumps up on a job board. And I'll give a little shout out to Rachel Johnson in your class. She's named to a 3-year position to the board of Leadership Healthcare, which is such an honor, and she'll be a great resource too to connect with her and her experience and how to really get plugged in.
And then to echo that again, I joined Leadership Healthcare this past year and I participated in their managed care cohort. And I would say just throughout my conversations, particularly with big healthcare companies, that was always just such a good kind of talking point. And they appreciated that I reached out and kind of, you know, intertwined myself in like the local healthcare community. And it was always like 2 or 3 minutes of positive conversation, when in reality, it was like, you know, it was a great experience, but I wouldn't even say I necessarily contributed a ton to the managed care cohort, but it was a huge plus in the eyes of employers that I was, you know, proactive and did that.
That's awesome. And I was going to say, I saw that, Rachel, on LinkedIn. So that's a big deal. Congratulations about Leadership Healthcare.
Yeah,
Maybe,
I'm excited about it.
I actually have that on a slide in a little bit, so I'd love to have you talk about it since you're involved in it when we get to it. But yeah, that's awesome. Thank you guys for that input. And kind of, you know, along with what you just said, Renee, there's like different ways you can go about recruiting, and thinking about that graph I just showed. I mean, you really have to, healthcare is so broad. And so it sounds stupid, but that saying like stand for something or you'll fall for anything. You can't just say, I mean, you can right now, and maybe a lot of you are here, or maybe you are already more focused, but you can't just say, oh, I want to do healthcare. That is too broad. So I think the first step of recruiting is really narrowing in, and it doesn't have to be narrowing into one niche or one very specific thing, but at least narrow into like, what are the areas or area within healthcare you're targeting. And it might be areas within the industry, or it could be what function do I want to do within healthcare, but you have to narrow that down at some point. And that's what the second years are for, the VBHA, your classes, the CMC. We're all here to help you. If you're out here, we're here to help you kind of narrow that down, whether it's drawing you towards things you like or saying no to things you realize you don't like. You might sit in Larry's class and Mod 2 and be talking about a topic and be like, that sounds like the worst thing in the world. I don't ever want to be involved in the payer side or whatever it is. Or you might sit in that and say like, oh my gosh, I never even thought about that. Or in a company info session, learn about an area and think, oh, that's something I want to learn more about. So step 1 is narrowing down and then identifying, you know, what do they recruit for? So I've had people say, I really want to work in a hospital and I want to do marketing. Well, yes, that is obviously all hospitals have marketing, but that's not a common path for MBAs. The function, you know, marketing function within a hospital is not necessarily thinking we need an MBA to do this marketing. It's typically something maybe they start from a lower level and work up, or they want people with lots of industry experience in marketing in that specific niche. So it's important to think about like, what do I want to do and how does that match up with companies or areas within healthcare? And then what does that process look like so you can do the right path? I'm really into people being efficient with their time. You don't have a lot of time at Owen. You're going to be doing a million different things. So like, how can you make the most of your time in recruiting? And then the second piece of that is once you kind of narrow that down or know what you want to do, and this is something you'll do through lots of different things at Owen, but identify the gaps that you have on your resume or in your experience. Hopefully the sooner the better. Make a plan to fill those things. Broaden your network within the areas that make sense for you. You want to network with people, but you want it to be efficient and the right focus, and then engage in whatever that process looks like. So if you realize, like, I think I like healthcare consulting, to Courtney's point, you've got to get on board with the Owen Consulting Club and start that process and start networking with those people and do the case prep. If you're like Ken, I'm guessing you might have done it though, but you probably didn't do like all of the consulting like case prep as part of your process.
No, ma'am.
So, which is good. You didn't need to, and you shouldn't have spent that time doing that. So I think you want to, the goal is to narrow into the areas or area you want to focus on, and then figure out, and that's what we're all here to help you do, is like, what do I need to actually do? And then start doing it. And it might not be as like clean as like, do the step one, do step two. It's all overlapping, but did you all find that was kind of what your process looked like, even if you didn't have a name, the steps in your head for it, Renee and Ken and Jake?
Yeah, I'd say definitely narrowing was huge. Even just like you have all these companies coming on campus or all these info sessions, and you also have a lot of school and other things going on at the same time. So just being able to do your research, really narrow your focus on the ones that matter to you is helpful. Granted, if you are switching into healthcare and you really are trying to explore everything, like, it's also helpful to sit in on everything and soak in all the information and then chart your course from there. So I think it really just depends where you are currently in the process. And then talking to second years about, what they did to prepare and what they should be thinking about. Should they be networking more? Should they be, preparing for behavioral interviews or more like a case style interview? I think that's really where you can get the most bang for your buck, as opposed to, waiting to the last minute or just like kind of getting too broad in your focus. So that would be my recommendation.
I tend to agree. I spent more time case prepping than I actually should have, because my program at Optum is relatively new and I knew I was really interested in it. And so I didn't know if there was going to be a case or not, but I don't know what it's going to be like next year, but I'll try to get that insider knowledge for you, or what it's going to look like in the interview process next year, because I probably spent 20, 30 hours doing case prep to never have done a case in an official interview.
But now, in case you ever have one, you'll be really good at that.
I'm probably a little rusty by now, but we'll see.
That's awesome. So yeah, I mean, I think it doesn't always, like, again, like I said, it's not going to just happen. Like, don't do step two until you've done step one. But I think if you can, the sooner you can focus, and that might take a lot of conversations and getting exposed to things, the sooner you can focus, the better, and the easier moving to step two and starting to network will be.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to remember, and look, you might be touching on this later, but really look at career space and look at the interview questions that were asked in the past. I mean, a lot of the interviews that I had, it was like 50% overlap probably in terms of some of the things that I was asked, and I really prepared for some of those questions, and tried not to be too scripted in what I said, but kind of came in prepared. And generally the salary information and all of that stuff is pretty up to date in terms of what I saw at these companies. So in terms of what's important to you, whether it's hourly compensation or location or whatever, definitely use those resources.
That's a great point. And that's all will be available to you now or soon, because you're right. Like, there's a big difference in some of the things. I was literally talking to someone yesterday who said, I really wanted to do, X career path, but it pays so low. I can't do it. It's not for me. And that's not to say that was important to him, but it's important to know those parameters before you get to the final round. And then you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
I have to live where?
Did have that experience.
Yes. So just moving on, I think, that's what the process will look like. But just I kind of reiterate what I said before, is recruiting is going to happen through all different avenues in different ways. So obviously Courtney was talking about the process at Owen, and that there's a huge, for healthcare, a very robust recruiting process, but there's also things like the national career fairs, things, and I just used an example on the right there. That's from last year's National Black MBA Association's conference, and that was the snapshot of the healthcare companies who were there. So we don't have, 10 pharma companies and biotech companies coming to Owen, but a lot of pharma companies go to National Black. So when a student says, hey, that's what I want to focus on, the National Black or a National Career Fair might be a good avenue for that person to get exposed to those companies. Obviously, you can apply directly to companies. So Ken, I'm guessing you applied directly to all of those residency programs just on their website. So you proactively sought them out. Obviously, you can do that for any area within healthcare, any company, or it doesn't beyond healthcare. Everyone was talking a little bit about networking and things like leadership healthcare. I know for a fact students have gotten their internships by sitting at a table with someone and talking about their company or some project they were working on, and then that led to an internship or a full-time role. And then obviously it's not even limited to that. So the bottom here, this is from, you can't see it very well. It doesn't look like it's even in English here for some reason, but that was a snapshot. That's Leadership Healthcare. That was just a snapshot of events they had recently on their calendar. That is not a picture of Leadership Healthcare, and everyone weirdly looks like they're social distancing at the conference, or they don't like each other. But there's a lot of things. Leadership Healthcare is an amazing organization that has a lot of events. Now, how that will look this year, it probably will be more virtual events, but I know they're going to have a lot of opportunities for their members and especially students to engage in their different groups. I know, or Jake, did you say you were in one of their, like a specific group within Leadership Healthcare?
So they have specific cohorts that you can apply for. I think mine may have been 10 or 12 people, and it was very managed care focused. So if you want to learn, you don't have to come in as an expert or anything to be part of the cohort, but it's just really a discussion group where you'll have speakers come in, and you really just have conversations about kind of specific micro topics within kind of a more macro part of healthcare.
That's awesome. And Rachel, you must have been involved this past year too, I'm guessing.
Yeah, so while the managed care cohort was going on, I was in co-leading the leadership cohort. So we typically have 2 in the fall and 2 in the spring. So right now, I think it's data analytics and policy. But I would just echo kind of what everyone's saying. I heard about Leadership Healthcare a couple years ago now, and really just got super involved. And it's a really nice community of people. So it's about 500 to 600 members right now, but I mean, it's a strong group. I mean, a lot of people come to almost every event. There's tons of different style of events too. So there's like larger events, like their Christmas parties, that is, a large group. But then there's also the smaller ones, like the cohort and the coffees, where you can really get to know some of the members on a more personal level. So if you're interested, I'll send the links, but you can definitely look to get involved. I think there's potentially a reduced rate for students. And there's also the National Healthcare Council. So the council is like an organization based. So like Vanderbilt's a member of the council, and then Leadership Healthcare is the individual based. So all of the council events you can attend as well.
And the council has grown much larger than Nashville in recent years. There are companies outside of Nashville that now belong to the National Healthcare Council. It's one of the big meeting places for healthcare companies in the United States. Most large healthcare companies belong in some ways on the Healthcare Council. And Larry, our faculty advisor, helps do their fellows program every year from January through April. He does the education for that and brings in speakers, CEOs from all over the place, some of which you hopefully will get to see if we manage to get immersion off the ground. And also other ways to talk to you. I'm always happy to talk with students and help you figure out where you want to go in healthcare. And as we get you in a direction, then we can get you in front of Larry, and Larry usually puts 1 or 2 students a year directly in a position through his friends of Larry, as we call them. So definitely reach out as you're thinking through this. If you don't know exactly which way to go, I'm happy to talk with you.
And that, you all just mentioned it, but that just reminded me to remind you all that you have like a free pass for 2 years as a student. You have the student card. Everybody loves students. Like as soon as you all can use it now, you can start using it. As soon as you decided to go to business school, you're like a student. And I feel like people, I'm just thinking of leadership healthcare and Rachel and Jake and anyone else who was involved in something like that, you probably, hopefully felt this last year, that when you go to someone and say, hey, I'm like like I'm trying to learn, it's like people, hopefully doors feel like they're opening because people want to help you. And so anything that involves external networking, obviously everyone is networking within Owen and you're all students, but alums want to help you. You're a student. They want to help you. People who just hear the word student want to help you. So I hope you felt that a little bit too when you were doing all of your networking and things this past year.
Yep, for sure.
So at Owen, I mean, this probably goes without saying, but I think, and it changes a little bit every year, but I feel like at least half of the students who come into Owen who want to do healthcare, and some years it's more, have some kind of healthcare experience or coming from healthcare. Kia, I see you with a stethoscope on. I'm guessing you might be in healthcare right now. So we can all learn from you. But a lot of people are coming with healthcare, but if you are a career changer, so healthcare experience never hurts, but if you are a career changer, then you really want to get you want to show recruiters, if you don't have it and you're a career changer, you want to signal to recruiters that you're really serious about it and you're trying to get experience. And so if you can, the sooner you can get healthcare related projects or experience on your resume, the better. And that could also be through, and it's a good thing anyway, like a leadership role within the VBHA or another club. I know almost all of the professional clubs have first year board member roles. And then obviously, functional expertise through classes or a project or research with a professor or, helping your friend's company, startup in healthcare, do something. Like the more healthcare experience you can get for yourself, but then also to put on your resume, the better. And then obviously growing connections, which can start now if you want it to. Did you guys do projects, or how did you feel? Like, I think almost a lot of you already had experience, but Ken, I know you, how did you get any career,
You're breaking up a little bit, but I think I got the gist. That was one of my main reasons for joining VBHA, was just to signal to recruiter, to start networking within my classmate, cohort, but also just to signal to employers, hey, I am serious about this career shift and I definitely want to do healthcare. And so that's what VBHA was definitely something I could talk about in interviews. And then also every elective that was open to me, I tried to take a healthcare class just to, again, signal to others and for my own knowledge, just to start learning more about the industry that I was hoping to go into.
Yeah, I would just say, know your why. Coming from somebody who did have a healthcare background as kind of like an analyst associate type role on our team, I was able to kind of position my past experience and my knowledge of kind of the healthcare landscape and how I'm using business school to kind of fill those gaps that I may have had in some of the finance and, kind of operations and things like that, and how I'm using that knowledge to kind of transform into a more managerial, hopefully future executive role. So if you're in kind of that experience, I think that was kind of a well-received explanation for like why I'm doing what I'm doing now. So as you're thinking about your why, just kind of maybe think of it in similar terms if you're in that position that I'm in.
Yeah, I would echo all of that. And I would say one of the best advice I got from Jordan Holland, who was former manager, also Owen alum, was, I was like, I have healthcare experience. Like I feel like the main thing I have, like I'm coming to business school to round out my, experience and resume with other things. And I was like, do I even do the healthcare concentration? And he said, absolutely. Like the healthcare concentration is your cohort. Those are your people. Those are gonna be the people that you're close with, that you are gonna, stay connected with far after you graduate from Owen. And then the other things like, finance or ops, you can still do. You can do a double or even triple concentration, but don't shy away from healthcare classes and electives just because you feel like you've had a long career in healthcare already. And you learn something. They are very valuable. And you also get connected with Birch and Larry and people that can also help you, navigate recruiting and things even post-Owen.
That's a great point, and I don't tell the other functions I said this, but I feel like in, people are always so concerned, like, what should I concentrate in? And it does matter when you're recruiting now, because a company wants to see like the signal that, like, yes, I'm serious about healthcare or finance or whatever they're recruiting for. They hope you're concentrating in it. But in a few years, like once you're an alum, no one's going to be like, are you a finance MBA? Like the concentration doesn't matter, except I do feel like you can forever brand yourself a healthcare MBA. I know it's a concentration at Owen, but it's actually more than that. Like what you were saying, Renee, with like Birch and Larry and the program and all the classes and the huge group of healthcare alums, you can really brand yourself a healthcare MBA forever. So I do think it's a really amazing concentration and program to be in. Courtney, anything else to add when you think of what companies are looking for in students and healthcare companies that you think it's helpful for people to focus on at Owen that I missed?
No, I think everything you said is exactly what I would suggest. I know that it can be nerve-wracking coming in if you feel like you don't have experience and it's going to be a switch, but there are resources that we've been talking about today that you can utilize and utilize quickly. So certainly there are classes that come up. You'll be in core classes for a lot of the immediate time, but you have VBHA, you have alumni, and you're a student, so people are eager to help you. So if you know already you're going to focus on this, that's a great jumping off point, because then you know how to sort of start and what's important.
Awesome, thank you. And then, we talked about these already, so we don't have to talk too much about this, but obviously we were talking about leadership healthcare and what a huge resource that is for students. Did any of you get involved with anything else in Nashville or any other groups, or Birch? Have you had experience? I know there's been students who've gone to the Entrepreneurship Center to work with startups to get experience in the past, and I know ACHENT.
Yeah, we have people work with the Entrepreneur Center and some other entrepreneur organizations downtown quite a bit. We usually have a healthcare student that works with Jumpstart Foundry, or what are they calling themselves these days? Oasis, whatever their name is. I think they've changed again on me, but they do a lot of healthcare startups, and we usually have a healthcare student that works with them in some wise. I am a faculty advisor for the ACHE for Middle Tennessee. So you can join ACHE. That's important if you're planning to go into hospitals and things like that. In particular, nearly every executive in a hospital is going to have their fellowship from the ACHE. Leadership healthcare, as you've heard before, is a great place to spread out and sort of learn what you want to do in healthcare and make connections. And then, of course, Vanderbilt has the Wondery, which also works in combination with entrepreneurship, and has some of our professors at Owen that participate at the Wondery that are excellent, David Owens and a handful of other people. And we go a little bit everywhere, as we said before. Healthcare students have their fingers in a little bit of everything, so we see them go to all these places.
And I'm not sure if Renee's email has gone out yet, but we have a spreadsheet from our class, and if you scroll all the way to the right, whenever you do receive that, and that has a few people who have done in-school internships in healthcare and some independent studies with healthcare professors. So if you want to reach out to those individuals separately, just to see what their experience was like, whether or not that would be worthwhile for you, that's just, again, another option.
That's so awesome, because I feel like that's an area I'm saying do projects, do in school, but it's hard to find them. Sometimes it feels like, where are these coming from? So that's an awesome resource.
And I'll just say, Courtney passes them our way all the time throughout the year, or Birch, and Larry. And so we'll be posting them on Brightspace, and you'll just see the pop-up, like apply for these opportunities. And a lot of our students definitely take advantage of that.
Yes, that's true. So that's awesome. Definitely look at that resource. I know we're running close to the end, but I did want to show, I think I captured everyone in the current class where they're interning, but you know, as you can see, it's such a diverse group of companies in all areas within healthcare, and it changes. You know, some of these are companies that people go to every summer, and some of them are, like, I don't know if anyone's ever been at UPMC that I've worked with before. So it's awesome that like every year there's, yeah, which is so great, because then it's one more organization that we have an alum at or had an alum at, and just expanding the reach. So it's awesome. And it's such a broad area. So when you look at, if you go into LinkedIn or you look up healthcare alums and do that search for Owen, it's so diverse, and there's so many of them. And like I said, they're all kind of part of this group that's like, yes, I was the Healthcare MBA. So they'll be a huge resource, but the best and first place to start is the current second years for sure. So at awesome companies, I wanted to just show, you know, just generally, if you thought about the timeline for recruiting for internships your first year, this is in practice what it might look like, where, you know, and healthcare to me, and Courtney, you can tell me if you feel differently, but I feel like it falls in the traditional recruiting category, where if you think about things happening in the first part of the year and the second part of the year, for some functions, recruiting happens very quickly, like HOP, a lot of things in finance, brand management, a lot of that is happening in the fall, and some healthcare opportunities can happen in the fall. So if you wanted to go to a national career fair, those happen in the fall. They happen in September and October. That's where I showed that snapshot of like, here's a bunch of pharma companies. So if you wanted to do early recruiting, you can do it, but a lot of the healthcare companies are more in that traditional timeline, where they are posting their internships in October, November, December, and interviewing students beginning in January. And then even a lot of areas within healthcare, like smaller companies or startups, and I think a lot of hospitals, but Ken, I'd love to hear what your timeline was like, can happen later in the spring.
No, that was pretty similar. I applied to several internships, I think in the November, December timeframe, and then all my interviews were over the phone or on Skype or Teams, and those all happened in January, February at the latest.
Yeah, so like it's just the traditional. So in some ways that's nice for healthcare students, that most people are not going to get here and like, I have to interview in September unless you do Forte, in which case you probably already interviewed. But that's kind of the general timeline. And then, you know, what should you do now? I mean, I will say some advice I give everyone is to relax a little bit too, because it's going to get really crazy when you get here. But if you want to do things, definitely, you know, complete the modules in career space, get your resume. Like those are easy things to do that you can do before Owen starts and things get crazy. The second thing, just start to think about, you don't have to choose, you don't have to decide now. And you certainly shouldn't if you're not ready to. Like you want to get to Owen and get exposed to different areas within healthcare, but start to think about what's important to you and narrowing down your focus. Is it a certain geography? Is it an area within healthcare? Is it a function? A lot of healthcare is there are a lot of roles that are a little more entrepreneurial to get. And so the 2-Hour Job Search is a great book for everybody about approaching the job search, especially helpful, I think, for areas that don't just like come on campus and recruit a bunch of MBAs and here's our process. It's a really helpful career book. And we actually have the author come and speak. He'll be speaking in August to all of you. The LinkedIn Guys course, you'll probably be using LinkedIn a lot. That's in career space and that's super helpful. So do that over the summer while you have time and start reading things about healthcare. So I just added, I love the Modern Healthcare emails that you can sign up for if you want to do anything in Nashville, or it's just helpful to know what's happening in Nashville healthcare. The Nashville Business Journal is great, but I would love to hear for you all, Renee, Ken, Jake, Birch, Rachel, if there were things that you read or really found to be helpful resources when you were doing recruiting last year.
Specifically, I would add, I was recruiting for obviously DaVita and then Answered were my 2 top companies. And so I made sure you can, like with Becker's, they have a lot of sub pages. So there's like a Becker's ambulatory surgery. There's a Becker's like provider space. And so like I was signing up for those specific newsletters. So I knew it was going on in those areas, since in my past role, I didn't have a lot of experience in kidney care or ambulatory surgery. So I had to really get up to speed so I could talk knowledgeably in my interviews.
Yeah, I'm a modern healthcare guy, and I also like the advisory board daily briefings. And even if you just have like 1 minute during the day and you don't even open the links, like at least you see what the headlines are, and even that kind of gives you like a subliminal understanding of what might be going on that day. And when you actually get some time, you'll take 5 or 10 minutes and actually read an article. But I feel like I absorb more than I think that I do just from opening that email in the morning.
Same as Jake.
Yeah, I would say that I definitely look through Modern Healthcare and the Business Journal. I pick it up whenever I'm over at Owen, and also do Becker's fairly regularly, once every couple of weeks at least, and Health Affairs, and a couple of advisory board, as someone mentioned, and even the Wall Street Journal and New York Times, just to keep up with what's in there currently, what's going on in the world and new stuff. Wall Street Journal has a healthcare page, so you can go see what's making the page in the Wall Street Journal, and I always try to look at that. So there's various articles that you can pick up on, but the more you can round yourself out and sort of know what's going on in the space, the better you'll be when you do interviews.
Yeah, there'll be no shortage of headlines and news right now in healthcare. So I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I know you all are in the middle of busy days, but thank you so much, Renee, Ken, and Jake, and Rachel, and Birch, and Courtney for joining, and all of you guys for joining and sharing your interest in healthcare. I know there'll be an email going out from the VBHA very soon that has amazing resources. So thank you guys for putting that together and sharing. And if anyone has any questions that we didn't answer, if you want to put them in the chat, I'll make sure that we get back to you with some information. Thanks, Jake, for sharing that. But yeah, we're excited to have you all at Owen. Any last words, students, you want to share? I really appreciate you joining. Courtney, Birch, and I will be holding down the fort.
We look forward to meeting you all. Talk to you soon. Feel free to email us with any questions, and we'll definitely get back to you. And join VBHA.
Yes, definitely join VBHA. That should have been my last call out. But thank you guys. Have a great rest of the week and really appreciate you all joining.